Hello, listeners, and thank you for joining me. I'm your host, Ty Walters, and today's episode is a discussion with Jacelyn Molina, aka Jace. She's a customer experience specialist at SellerSmile, and coming up in May, she's going to be with us for 4 years. You're the second most senior team member behind Yassine. And if you've been listening and following along, you heard my discussion with Yassine. We talked about his digital nomading and working from around the world. And Jace, you're up next. So today I want to get to know Jace, your background, where you're coming from, and I'd like to get to know you in customer service, how you came to that role. We're going to talk about how we first met as colleagues at the same company at Seller Labs and Snag Shout. And I'd like to talk a little bit about what it's like living and working where you are in the Philippines in general, but also during the pandemic that happened to all of us. We've discussed in detail about how Manila was maybe handling things differently and even more severely at times than the different countries that the rest of our team is from. So I'd really like to talk about that and anywhere else we can go with it. So thank you so much for joining us. And I'm so happy you're here.
Happy to be here as well. Thank you, Ty, for this opportunity.
Tell us who you are, where you're from, and your background kind of leading up to your professional life and where it started with customer service.
Sure. Well, as you said, it's Jace here, 35 years old from Marikina City. That's on east side of Manila here in the Philippines. Happily married. Like I always say, my husband's happy and I'm married. We have a beautiful daughter who's turning 14 this August. In terms of customer service or my career, I started as far back as 2007. That would be my first customer service experience. It was outbound. It wasn't really like the typical, like, hey, thank you for calling, stuff like that. It was more of an outbound type of calling. So we gather information, verify that. So it's pretty short calls. And I was with that company for less than a year. And then I had my daughter and I was a full-time mom for 3 years. So the only time I got back working again for full-time was in 2011. And then this time it was that type of customer service that you guys would have an idea where like, yeah, thank you for calling. It was for a telco in the US, Cricket. If you've had that service before, I was with them for almost a year. I've handled customer service and technical support. So it was kind of a hybrid thing, really great. I would say like a training ground for me in developing my customer service. And then from there, from US, I went to a UK-based company. And this time it's for apartment lettings or apartment rentals in central London. So I started with a company as a virtual concierge. So that was really like a full-time hands-on experience in a customer service setting where I would call customers like, hey, have you received all the information that you need prior to arriving to London? Here are the information. And then please let us know. I give them like contact details to reach us anytime they have the information. And then after almost a year, I laterally transferred to a different department in the same company, but this time I was with corporate sales, in which we handle business bookings. So we have leisure bookings and then the business bookings. So that was our team. So I do like almost everything, like closing the sale to like handling the bookings, closing the bookings for these clients and making sure that by the time they arrive, until they leave our apartments, I'm their point of contact. So that was really like, I would say, I was really, my customer service experience there was like trained very well because I do email support, I do chat support and phone support all at the same time. So it was crazy. the multitasking in that kind of business was crazy, but I felt like I really learned a lot in that kind of type of, the work setup that we had there. And I've been with them for like 3 years. That's also where I met Janice.
Hmm.
Um, so from there, in 2016, that was the only time I was introduced to e-commerce with Seller Labs, and that's where I met you and Michael. So, and the rest is history. So I've been with Seller Labs for technically a year, and then Paul, which is the founder of Snack Shack, where he left Seller Labs and just started Snack Shack on his own. So I went with him until 2018, the first quarter of the year. Um, so my knowledge of e-commerce there was just pretty basic versus when I joined SellerSmile, where I learned a lot in terms of e-commerce. But the customer service, which is what I've learned since I started working, the essence of it was there. It's just like there are just different lines of business that I was in throughout the years.
Thank you for giving us that background. You're quite a customer service pro. You've had experience in different contexts for different companies. You mentioned the ability to handle email, chat, and phone all simultaneously. I want to take a little, I have some notes I want to return to, but let's take a step back. You talked about e-commerce and having kind of early exposure to that in maybe with Seller Labs or right before that. But what is e-commerce like where you live, like shopping online? Most of the people listening to this might be based in the US or the UK, but in the Philippines, are you shopping on Amazon or what is it like?
So I was exposed to buying online, that term, as early as 2015, and we don't have platforms similar to Amazon or eBay. So what we find are stores that are posting on social media like Facebook, Instagram. So it's mostly on Instagram that I find stuff, and I'm a makeup lover. So
Mhm.
wherever I was like, oh, this store is selling like authentic makeup. So they would post like photos of the actual item that they're selling. And then that's where we communicate mostly through social media. The actual e-commerce platform, similar to Amazon, was kind of introduced here in the Philippines. Although one of these, which is Lazada, I'm pretty sure you're already
Mhm.
familiar with that. Even though they were founded back in 2012, they really got popular, and also the other platform during the pandemic season, probably because people can't go out and they would resort to like buying online. So that was the time that their business really boomed, or they were pretty much people are taking advantage or using
Mhm.
the platform during the pandemic. But my experience personally buying online is as far back as 2015. But I was doing it, like I said, through social media.
Got it. So that's actually happening here quite a bit now, but not as prominent as the main platforms like Amazon, of course.
Amazon. Mhm.
Shopify sites are popular, but they're not as much centered on social media. So the scene in terms of shopping behaviors different where you work. Um, I wanted to mention as well, or go back to you talked about your experience, email and chat and phone all at once, and that was like
Mhm.
the training ground. Did you have mentors in that situation, or were you sort of like just thrown into the situation and you had to figure it out? Or tell me more about kind of like the structure or the approach of how you learned so much.
Well, this company was also like a startup. When I joined them back in
Hmm.
2013, they actually were just like 2 years old or turning two at that time. And then the corporate sales team was just established a year after I was hired. So when I moved into the team, I was also part of like the pioneers or the OGs, is what we
Hmm.
have. And yeah, the processes that we had there were basically just like how, like, oh, we're getting this. How do we handle this? Okay, this is how we're going to approach things. So the process just, it birthed from something that that is happening. Like if
Hmm.
we receive calls, how do we handle this? If we receive chats, or do we entertain chats? Stuff like that. It was, do we focus on phone support, or should we just focus on email support? And because we're also the sales team, the way that we would, how can we get more bookings? So we would utilize all that. And that's why we actually had to cater to all that kind of support system in order for us to close sales and basically get more bookings and earn more money.
So it sounds like it was more of a startup environment. It was new. You had to be creative about it, and it's why
Definitely.
you adapted so well to our startup here at SellerSmile. We consider ourselves still early, and it's day one all the time, and that's great
True.
to hear, Jace. We benefit from the experience that you bring, and it really shows in the work that you do. So
Yeah.
that's a good segue here. I want to talk about uh, you work for SellerSmile, and I know well how the role that you fill. But tell us in your own words, what is it like working for SellerSmile? Tell us about maybe like some of the customer service activities you're involved with currently in your day to day.
So I started back in 2018 May, and I was hired for the reputation management. So doing like answering product reviews, customer product reviews, and then customer seller feedback, all that kind of stuff. And from there, you saw like an opportunity, like, hey, maybe Jace can handle one account, so let's train her there. My first baby was Milkicks. I remember that. And then from there, I just had like more accounts, and then being a hybrid from handling accounts and doing seller feedback or reputation management until I became a full-time account manager or account specialist. Um, but I do recall, like, even though I was doing account management, I had done trainings as early as from the year that I was hired, because I was hired May of 2018. Janice was probably around third or fourth quarter of the same year. And I had to train her to do reputation management as well. So when I was recalling, like, when did I start doing trainings? And now that I remember, oh my God, it was in the same first year that I got hired. I was already training people. So aside from doing account management or customer service, I also do trainings once in a while for new hires, or even with, fellow OG people who need to be trained or up trained. If we do have updates in certain accounts, then that's something I also do once in a while.
You're right. There's so much training happening, not only for new people that
Mhm.
join the team, but in all the different client accounts that we work with, the cross training,
Mhm.
and the experience that you bring to the table, I think, comes through in your training. Team members are always commenting on how they really enjoy to be trained by you. It's easy to learn, and
Aw,
so
thank
it's something that you
you.
bring to the team, and it's really appreciated as well. Tell us a little bit what it's like working where you're living in Marikina City, maybe pre-pandemic, and then like how things changed and where they are now. Like I mentioned, we all experienced COVID in different ways, depending on where we're
Mhm.
living, different stages, and working and maintaining normal life was difficult. But
Mhm.
so give us a glimpse into what was that like for you.
Well, in terms of like the change pre and post pandemic on my workflow, there wasn't really any, because we have been working like remotely since day one that I got hired. So the change wasn't really that drastic in terms of my actual work, but the experience of like people staying at home compared when pre-pandemic, like my daughter, she goes to school, my husband, she goes to his office, so I'm pretty much always alone at home throughout the day until they're back after school and office. So that was where I really adjusted. Like I was used to having a routine. Like once they leave to school and to office at around a specific time, like, oh, okay, I'm alone, then I can go to sleep. And then when I wake up, still not here, then I would probably start working at that time. But when pandemic hit and everyone's here, I'm like, it it was really crazy because 24/7 they're all here. And that is how I feel like, oh, kind of my workflow got disrupted in a way. The usual schedule that I had kind of got disrupted, but the actual workflow itself didn't. It's just that I had to get used to seeing my husband all the time, seeing my daughter all the time. Um, and the start of pandemic in 2020, that was also the same year that my daughter had to do homeschool or online schooling. So
Mm.
that was also one of my main struggles because I had to juggle like work and then helping her with her school activities, which it was so difficult for me because I've been out of school for years. So having to learn what she's trying to learn from school in order for me to be able to help her,
Mm.
that was the tricky part because in order for me to learn it, I have to read and that would take my time. And then I have to like try my best to let her understand, like, I guess this is what your teacher wants you to learn, but I wasn't 100% sure. But those were really some of the struggles, and I saw my daughter struggling equally as well. So we had backlogs of her like work, like schoolwork, and by the end of the school year, we were trying to like be able to submit all of those schoolworks that she has for backlog. So that really affected me during that time for 2 weeks because I had to work and then I also have to spend time helping her out with her backlogs. I only had like maybe 3 or 4 hours of sleep. I was always cranky. I broke down like one too many times during those 2 weeks. So you do remember how I requested for mental health days during that time because it was really that difficult. I guess during that height of the pandemic, that was when it was really difficult for my family and for myself, how I would juggle my time working and then being a mom and a teacher, all that at the same time. But that's why this school year 2021 to 2022, we decided to just uh, she would just stop for the school year and rest. And we'll continue by this coming school year 2022-23. But yeah, it was a big help because we were all exhausted mentally, physically, emotionally during the time, all the transition, given the fact that uh, people are getting sick here and there. My family's getting sick as well. So all that emotional difficulties that we had to go through. Yeah, it was really tough.
It was tough, and thank you for describing that. And amazing you're able to fulfill that many roles and keep it all together. The key being the mental health days, right? Like sometimes you just need to take a step back and take a break. And I'm glad that we're in an environment at SellerSmile. We can provide that when it's needed. And, we're going to continue to because it's so necessary. So what's it like now? You said your daughter's taking a break from school and but are like in terms of your like local community, are restrictions still up in terms of like needing masks and or like proof of vaccination?
Yes, but it's actually, I would say, more lax compared to like from 2020. Right now, like my daughter, she's fully vaccinated. All of us here in the household are fully vaccinated. Before, they don't allow like kids below like 18 or 16. They do have age restrictions, and my daughter's turning 14 this year. So there was like a whole year she can't go out. But now, like from last year alone, December, we were able to travel like outside Marikina. That was like the first time we've traveled again since the pandemic hit. So we're really happy that we had that kind of freedom already to like travel or move around. And it's more, I guess, right now, like I think it started earlier this month, where they are really allowing people to travel, to dine in. But of course, we're still required to wear masks and show proof of vaccination. But it's not as strict as it was when it started back in 2020. So those are good things. Like over the weekend, Saturday, I met up with my best friend, and I brought my daughter with me. So that was kind of fun because at least my daughter, even though she's not attending school, she still has like activities here and there that she can do outside of our home.
Right, that's important. Starting to do some of those normal things. There's this contradiction, and I covered this in my conversation with Yassine. We spoke about it, where you think like work from home or like a remote job, it seems
Mm-hmm.
like it's easy or it's like filled with freedom. But then in some instances, like when everyone's in the house or in the home, it's like
Mm-hmm.
a extra challenge. So Yassine was talking about just the challenges that of traveling and working on the go. And then, of course, yes, like when you're sharing that space, used to be alone, now you're
Mm-hmm.
disrupted. So it was a unique struggle. Collectively, everyone at SellerSmile was dealing with just a unique shift in our day to day. Fortunately, we still, were able to maintain our business activities, and SellerSmile continued growing. We didn't mention it at the beginning of our conversation, but I happen to know that you used to study nursing in a
Ah.
formal way. So, yes, if you don't mind, I want to talk about that. And just to give you a brief intro to that, I share that background with you, kind of like training in another field. I studied kinesiology or exercise science, and
Mm-hmm.
you nursing, kind of in the health and medical field. And now none of us are doing that. We're doing customer service. So
Correct.
I want, I know uh, you didn't have maybe like a very long career in that field or one at all, but talk to me a little bit about maybe how that background or just that training translated and I don't know, like, do you ever kind of think about going back to that at all, or do you think it relates to your ability to kind of learn and teach and train, or how do you see that as it fits into your role today?
Right now, since I graduated in 2007, so that's a very long time ago. Definitely, there are a lot of changes in terms of the medical field per se. A lot of upgrades, a lot of definitely whatever I learned back in 2007 isn't. There are probably a few theories that are still applicable, but mostly because due to modernization, a lot of things that are basically just modernized in the hospital setup. Definitely, what I learned before may not be applicable today. So, in order for me to get back in track, and be back in this field, I would have to go um, study again and learn everything, learn the new theories. But I might not have the time for that. So I right now, I honestly can't see myself going back to that kind of field. And maybe it wasn't something that was meant for me because I do remember that I did try like applying, looking for nursing jobs or at least nursing related jobs. I even tried applying as a customer service in a hospital because at least I can apply what I have already experienced. But it didn't really transcend. So I feel like maybe this is not where I'm really meant to be. Maybe even though I do have the license, I may be a registered nurse here in my country. Um, I still am able to like apply it on our day to day, like here at home, especially for taking care of my husband and my daughter whenever they get sick. Like, oh, mom, I feel this and that. And I'm like, you're just dehydrated. Go get some water. My daughter would have like, "Oh, mom, I feel dizzy. Do we need to get a doctor?" No, you're just dehydrated. Just drink water.
Just
You should
cut
be
to it.
fine. Yes. stuff like that. I mean, those are things that I've learned from school that are still applicable today.
Cool. So it makes you maybe like just like a better stay-at-home working mom because you don't have to leave and go see a healthcare professional every time you have a question. So
Exactly.
I want to switch gears a little bit. Before we started recording, you talked about how on Zoom you were taking some Korean lessons. How
Ah,
has that been going? Tell me more.
see, I've since I have like I really love watching K dramas when I do have the spare time, and I listen to a lot of K-pop, or not just K-pop, but just Korean songs in particular. So my love for those activities, that was where the idea branched out. Like maybe I should try learning the basics, not just listening to it, but also trying to like read the characters, the Hangul, and also learn how to write it. And I saw this opportunity, like, oh, they're offering classes. And it's very affordable, so I thought, why not join? It's been going great so far. The basic knowledge that I have before I attended classes was actually it kind of improved my reading of Hangul. So whenever like there's a favorite Korean song that I've heard, like, oh, I wanted to sing this really bad. Before I would look for lyrics where it's written in like English letters so that I can at least pronounce it properly. But it's way different if you are able to read the actual Korean letters or the Hangul to be
Mm.
able to pronounce it properly. So it was one of it. Like I wanted to sing a Korean song properly. That was one of my motivations, and also to like read subtitles and get to like translate, oh, what did he say? And I'm
Mm.
like, oh, okay, so new vocabularies and whatnot. So it's pretty fun. It's a good way to like add up to the usual routine of working day to day, to at least some to look forward on an activity that's not work related. And it's also helping like enriching, helping my brain to work rather
Mm.
than just it's all just work related stuff. Then at least I get to do something else outside of it.
I want to ask you a few more questions and then we'll wrap up. You're interfacing with customers every day,
Mhm.
customers that have purchased online from a seller, it's Amazon or Shopify or Walmart. So you have a lot of experience empathizing with the customer, seeing the crazy types of situations they get themselves in. It's insane sometimes, and we're the assistants. We get them to the resolution. So if you had to think about like advice for sellers, seeing everything, that wisdom and the history you've built up of what works, what doesn't, if you were able to kind of like offer some wisdom in terms of what you should focus on as a seller in terms of your customer experience, what things come to mind? What would you say?
That's a good question. I think it would really vary on if it's like a startup business versus if it's like a big business already that has been established for a while. And I'm talking like big brands, like already commercialized well. Um, for companies like that, a good customer service is for me that they should offer to their customers, like um, but I think this is a blanket or applicable for all. Like every time a customer would ask for help on anything, that they should be able to uh, empathize to the customer and like get to the bottom of what's going on. We're here to help, not just like superficial, like, oh, and use templates like, oh, thank you. We're going to get back to you. There's a different kind of feeling whenever, because I myself, I'm a consumer. I would purchase stuff online or from brick and mortar stores. So whenever there is something wrong and I need help, I would know if someone is really genuinely wanting to help me. So I think in all of businesses, regardless of how big or how small, one of the things that they have to, or in order for them to be successful in terms of customer service, is to know how to empathize and know how to get in the bottom of what the customer really needs. Because some customers would really want to vent out, but at the end of it, they just have a very small issue. But sometimes they would vent out first. So allowing customers and empathizing from them, but making sure that you will address their concern. That would really help businesses, especially for smaller companies or those startup businesses, because having a good customer service, and I see this from my personal experience with customers that I handle, whenever they would feel like, oh, thank you so much, Jace, you just got like a long time customer. That for me makes me feel like, oh my God, thank you. That means that I've done my job well. So I guess for small businesses, having like a good customer service, that would help increasing your customers along the way, because it's a word of mouth. Like, oh, this company, they offer good customer service, and then they would tell everyone, and eventually they will gain more customers. So I think it's really more about being empathic, and the term customer obsessed, that has stuck to me from one of the mentors that I had back then. He told me that I should be customer obsessed. I make sure that whatever the customer needs, if it's something that a company can give, of course, there should always also be drawing the line. But at least if it's something that the company can give, then why not, right? Yeah, I feel like for customer service, it's more on empathy. And from there, it's just going to transcend in anything that they would do.
Yeah, you mentioned empathy, so making the customer feel like you understand, you get their unique pain, and then cutting to the issue. A lot of times customer service can be like an interrogation, or you got to prove you're not lying first. The customer wants a resolution, and it's our job to give it to them. I also, like you mentioned, when you see a customer write back and give you a compliment and thank you for the service, I know exactly what you mean. It's a little, boost in your step. It's a nice, it just feels good. And it's the reason why we do it. And I think that's a good sign. Like, you just got to follow your gut and your instinct. If it feels good and it feels right, that's usually the best thing to do. And you touched on customer obsession. This is Amazon's #1 leadership principle. And we try to embody that at SellerSmile as much as possible, because the results come through with that mindset, right? Like, if you're obsessed, you're going to see details that others don't. You're going to notice things that will help you help the customer. So we're going to continue with that mindset and not only help our clients' customers, but our clients themselves. We covered a lot today, your background into customer service and what you do at SellerSmile, some of your thoughts on e-commerce and the pandemic. I mentioned before we started recording, I wanted to have you back for a second round of a conversation later this year and see how things have changed with your situation. Maybe you're back to pre-pandemic with an empty room and everything's back to normal. I hope that happens. Like you, I appreciate the focus and the emptiness of that space. Before we end our call today, is there anything else that you'd like to mention or share?
Well, I'm just really happy to be part of this interview or discussion today, and really looking forward to the next one. And I do hope there are quite some new changes so I can share it to you and to everyone else who will be listening or seeing this one.
Great. Thank you so much, Jace. We'll talk to you again soon. Until then, have a good one.
You too. Thank you.
To find the show notes, which include links to the articles and resources discussed, go to sellersmile.com/033. And if you found my conversation with Jace valuable, hit subscribe and you'll get the next episode straight to your device. Thanks again and keep smiling.